This topic is about organic chemistry. Now here we're looking at exactly what the state standards are that the state of Texas wants you to know and understand. And before we get into our lecture, we're going to talk briefly about what are these standards. So the Texas State Standard is 7.5A. And what that standard says is the student knows that interactions occur between matter and energy. And yes, they do. Matter and energy do occur, and there are interactions, but specifically here for this particular TEK that we're looking at, you're supposed to be able to identify. Now the term identify means to make an association with, to recognize that organic compounds, which is right here, organic compounds contain carbon, which is a key element in organic chemistry, and other elements such as hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen, and sulfur. So that is what we're going to look at today. We're going to be talking about organic chemistry, and we're going to be going through my notes, and I'm going to go ahead and give an explanation of what you need to know for the state standards. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about a few things you need to remember whenever you're watching these videos. Number one, make sure you have a copy of my notes. My notes you can download usually directly from my website, and it's at the link on the page where you have clicked this video, which is then taking you to my YouTube channel. So make sure you have a copy of the notes in front of you as we're going through this. You can add notes and make notes as I'm sitting there giving a lecture. Also, make sure you're actively listening. The whole purpose here is for you to learn. So if you're putting on your earbuds or whatever, you're watching TV and not paying attention to the video, you're really not going to learn anything. The goal here is for you to learn. And so I condense all this material into a quick lecture for you to understand what it is we're talking about. Now I will go fairly fast in my videos. My videos are not designed to have you keep up with me in copying notes, nor do I play these videos unless maybe I have a sub in my class and ask you to try and keep up with me. So I don't take time to pause for you to actually copy notes. So as you're writing, you're probably going to have to pause the video if you're having to make up an assignment or retest for a test that you didn't understand or a topic that you didn't understand. If you have to recopy my notes in class, make sure you pause the video as you're going. And if you've missed my class and are trying to make up the notes, again, also make sure that you're pausing the video. And the last thing I want to say is go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel has a list of all the videos, but they're also all linked through my website. But whenever I post a new video, your email, you'll be automatically notified that I have posted a new video if you have it set up that way. So that's it, and we're going to move forward into our actual lecture. Organic chemistry. Well, before I talk about organic chemistry, I want to talk a little bit about what is chemistry and how is that different from anything else. Chemistry is really about the study of matter. For example, I have a pencil in front of me. I use this pencil to figure out, every day I write with it, but what is it made up of? How do I make the graphite that is in this pencil? For example, the same material, the same chemicals that are in this, or the same original carbon that's in it, can also be used to make diamonds. So it's a study of matter, and how does that matter interact, and how do we get new things and create new compounds? There's another area called physics, and that is the study of matter and motion. A little bit different than chemistry, but a lot of times these two fields are very much intertwined. Organic chemistry, on the other hand, is the study of the carbon atom. So you should be looking at your notes right now. Again, you should have a printout of your notes in front of you while you're going through this video. Now, organic chemistry is the study of the carbon atom and compounds, carbon compounds, basically. And I have this backwards kind of on my notes. It should say carbon compounds. Can make in relation to life. So when we're talking about organic chemistry, what we're really talking about, what we're really thinking about is what is the carbon atom and how is that related to life in general? It used to be thought that organic chemistry was just simply the study of carbon, but it's more related to now the study of carbon and how that is related to life and life processes. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to first of all talk about a carbon compound, because again, we're supposed to be able to identify organic compounds. So what exactly is a compound? Well, a compound is where you have two or more different elements that come together to form, in this case, a molecule. And if we're looking here, for example, at water, you'll see water here is made up of H2O. Now, oxygen by itself has a very specific property. We breathe it in. It's something that we need to breathe in. We know that. Now, if you breathe in water, you're going to drown. Okay, but if you're breathing in, a whole bunch of water, that is, we do breathe in vapor water. But when you breathe in oxygen, our bodies need that. We use it all the time. And hydrogen, on the other hand, is a completely different element. If you look on the periodic table, which I will scroll down here real quickly, and I look at the periodic table here, and you'll notice that hydrogen is over here and oxygen is over here. Two totally different elements. One has nothing to do with the other. Hydrogen, if I put a match to it, will actually explode. It'll combust. Oxygen, on the other hand, we need it to breathe. So going back to our original notes here, when I take these two elements right here and I combine them into one molecule, I actually get a whole new compound. A compound that is totally different and has totally different properties than what I had before. And so a compound is when you combine two or more different elements to get something totally different, a brand new substance. So now we're going to talk about, well, what is an organic compound? Well, an organic compound is the same thing as any other compound. It does the exact same stuff. The only difference here is that it must have carbon. So we have carbon that is attached to other different elements, making it a compound, an organic compound. Usually these other elements specifically is usually hydrogen. Hydrogen's the big one. But there are other elements that we talked about. If you looked up here, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen, and sulfur. Those elements are usually part of the organic compound. And the current thinking is that it has to be involved in a life process. Now, for 7th grade science, that is not the definition I really want you to know, but for being absolutely correct, usually when we're talking about organic chemistry, we're talking about the carbon atom and other elements such as hydrogen, phosphorus, nitrogen, or sulfur attached to it, any combination of those, and it's involved with something to do with life. For the most part, whether it had decayed from life or had at some point gone through the life cycle, so to speak. So when we're talking about an organic compound, I really just want you, for our purposes, to focus on one element, and that's the carbon atom. If the carbon atom is present, most likely it's going to be an organic compound. So that is what organic compounds are. So what are these other elements that are common to organic compounds? Well, of course, number one, I said you must have the carbon atom. That is without a question. You absolutely have to have the carbon atom. The carbon atom is the key to this entire process. But there are other elements that are on here, and these other elements are sulfur, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and phosphorus. Now, I included two other elements, calcium and iron. For our purposes, do not remember that. Do not think about those two elements. Calcium and iron is very common to a lot of like life. For example, we need calcium and we need iron. Our blood needs iron to attach oxygen to bring it to cells, and calcium's in our bones. But when we're talking about specifically what the state standards are, they list the elements up here: hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen, and sulfur. So do not associate calcium and iron for the state standards purposes as part of an organic compound. So I just wanted to point that out, and I do have those in these notes, but since I have made these notes, since I wrote them down, things kind of have changed, and I believe that you just need to know these 5 elements right here. So we're going to go ahead and stick to those 5 elements of sulfur, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and phosphorus. Next, I'm going to talk to you and help you memorize these elements with a very simple acronym. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and I'm going to give you a really simple mnemonic or acronym to remember these organic compounds. Commonly, we've heard of CHON or CHO. CHON, the CHO has more to do with carbohydrates, for example. We've had CHON, but what the state of Texas wants you to remember specifically: carbon plus hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen, and sulfur. Those are the specific elements you need to remember. So if you can remember, all organics eat sponge. And it used to be, I used to say all organics eat at Sponge Cafe, but remember I mentioned to you earlier that you don't need to memorize this calcium and this iron anymore. That's not part of what the state standards are asking you to remember. So you just need to remember all organics eat at Sponge, or eat sponge. S-P-O-N-C-H. Now each one of these letters corresponds to a shorthand or chemical symbol for an element. And if I click forward here again, this is the elements of the periodic table. Every single one of these elements is a basic element in existence in the universe. And these are all the known elements that we as humans know of that exist in the universe. And these are the very basic parts. I kind of like to think of this as the alphabet of the entire world, because everything that we know of that we touch is made up of a combination of any one of these elements, or just in that element in its purest form. For example, you have silver right here. You've seen silver. We've touched silver before. You've touched copper before. These are things that are in their absolute pure elemental state. So when we look at these things, I've got highlighted here again: hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Those elements are part of sponge. S-P-O-N-C-N-H. Those are the chemical symbols for those particular elements. So going back here, when I look at sponge, I start with my S. S stands for sulfur. P will stand for phosphorus. O will stand for oxygen. N will stand, and for some reason I do not have nitrogen in here, so hold on for 1 second. I'm going to add nitrogen. And so you'll see here now that I've added nitrogen. Nitrogen is right here, and I drew an arrow over because if you go down this list, S-P-O-N-C-H is included there. So N, again, is for nitrogen. That is the chemical symbol for nitrogen. And then I have a carbon, and I put a little star over carbon because that is the most important element. Again, I'm going to stress that over and over. It must contain carbon for it to be an organic compound. So I made sure that those are the things that are that carbon atom is very important to be part of that organic compound, or for it to be an organic compound. And so all of these elements are responsible for pretty much life or organic compounds. And the calcium and the iron, although I have here they're not as important, the state of Texas doesn't really make you or want you to know that that is important in this process. So I am going to point out to you again, you do not need to memorize the cafe part or the calcium and the iron. And so that's one of the things. So moving down here, what are some types of organic compounds? What are we talking about when we talk about organic compounds? Well, some common organic compounds are fats, which are commonly called lipids. Fats are compounds that basically we store energy in our body as fats for long-term purposes. Then we have carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, they are quick energy. They are simple sugars. Glucose is a carbohydrate, and then you can have long chains of glucose hooked together to form something more complex called starches. Okay, starches are also considered carbohydrates. Then we have proteins. That's the muscle. That's the meat of most of everything that we do. Your muscles in your body, they're made up of proteins. We also have enzymes. A lot of our enzymes are made up of proteins. And what they do is speed up chemical reactions in our body. So it allows us to do things faster, make compounds that our bodies need faster. And then, of course, there's DNA, which we will learn about. It's called deoxyribonucleic acid, and that's kind of like the blueprint that's stored in our cells of how to make you. Those are the molecules that store information. So these are all different types of organic compounds. Now, all organic compounds are produced by life. There are some situations where organic compounds are made that are not produced by life. But generally that's kind of a shifting view. But I'm give you an example here of what we're talking about with regards to organic compounds and them being produced. So in this case, we're looking at producers. Now, we're about to learn a process called photosynthesis. That's going to come up next. And when we're talking about photosynthesis, we're talking about taking sunlight and having a plant convert that sunlight from solar radiant energy into chemical energy, which is food. And that's what happens here. We have carbon dioxide, a carbon dioxide molecule, which is added to hydrogen water, 6 molecules of water, to form this product right here, C6H12O6, which is glucose. That is a sugar molecule. That is what is called a carbohydrate. And so plants make this through photosynthesis. So that is an example of a chemical being made that is an organic compound. And this happens all the time, every day on our planet. And we're going to talk about that in more detail in the next lecture. So the last thing I want to talk about here are which of the following is an organic compound. We're taking a look at these various elements or these various compounds down here and which ones are considered organic compounds. So we're going to start first with sodium chloride. Sodium chloride, the chemical symbol for sodium chloride is NaCl. Now, you might be tricked into thinking that because there's a capital C, that's carbon. It's not. If you look on the periodic table here, which I'm going to click to the periodic table, here's carbon, capital C. But when you take a capital letter and follow it by a lowercase letter, that's going to indicate a totally different element, a totally different substance. So don't get fooled by, because there's a capital C and the next letter is lowercase, that would actually be carbon. There's other ones. There's ones like calcium. Calcium starts with a capital C, but it has a lowercase a. So you need to be really certain that when you look at these, that you're seeing the capital letter and making sure that it's not followed by a lowercase letter. Here's cesium, CS, capital C, lowercase s. So just be sure that when they're the next letter after it, like in this case, chlorine, Cl, the next letter is a lowercase l, that you know it's carbon, or it's chlorine and not carbon. And so for that case, sodium chloride or table salt is not considered an organic compound. We take a look here at glucose, C6H12O6. Well, I already told you earlier that it was an organic compound and it was formed. But if I look at this and I think about the term sponge, S-P-O-N-C-H, well, there's my C in sponge, there's my H in sponge, there's my O in sponge, but most importantly, it has carbon, and it has to have carbon. So because it has carbon, this would be considered an organic compound. The next one's ammonium hydroxide. Now you'll notice here, unlike the one before, it is missing a carbon, but it does have all the elements in sponge. It's going to have the nitrogen, which is the N. It's going to have the hydrogen here and here, which is up here. And it's going to have the oxygen, which is up here. But it does not have that starred carbon, that carbon that is so critical for an organic compound. So for that reason, it is not considered an organic compound. Finally, we have carbon dioxide, CO2. Now, this is an interesting situation because in carbon dioxide, it depends on whether or not it's going through a life process. But for our purposes, for my class, I want you to remember that because it has carbon, which is up here, and because it does have oxygen, which is right here, it is going to be considered an organic compound. So I would have starred that. So both 2 and 4 contain carbon compounds and other elements, the other elements which are included in sponge. So for that reason, number 2 and number 4 are considered organic compounds. So when we look again on our periodic table, if you can't remember sponge, you can highlight these 5 right here, if you know where they're located at, and highlight the letter H. And if you see those elements, those particular 5 plus the one on the left, the hydrogen, together, highlight them, and you know they have those elements in there, but especially carbon. It's got to have carbon. Again, I'm going to reemphasize that. Then you know it's an organic compound. So that is it for this lecture. I hope you understood organic chemistry as it relates to 7th grade science in Texas. And we're going to move on now to a brand new topic called photosynthesis. Congratulations. By reviewing this video and understanding the concepts, you have now mastered the topic of organic chemistry for 7th grade science.